Can we settle down, please? Okay, our next presentation is going to be by Engineer Charles Okunseri. He's CEO, Orbitcom Consult, and CR3J Homes and Shelters. He's representing the SSA. Please, can we, one house? Where is Engineer Charles Okunseri? Okay. So he's representing the special assistant to the president on jobs creation.
So do I start without everybody complete?
Please, can we put our hands together for him? I know that some of us are still having something to eat.
Apologies.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, the CEO for NSG. I'd like to also stand on all the other protocols. Charles Okunseri, as you see clearly there, I'm here representing the SSA to the President on Job Creations, Mr. Afolabi Mokwede. He sends his regards and his apologies for not being able to make it due to previous engagements. So we're going to do just a short brief. Let me try and keep to time. So we're looking at job opportunities in a low carbon initiative economy. Essentially, there are key pointers we're going to focus on. So we don't bore each and every one of us here. Let me just outline it. The introduction talks essentially about the low carbon sector. As you can see, it's defined as any activity which generates products and services which themselves deliver low carbon outputs. Next outline there will be for job results from this low carbon initiative. A key measure of success is the creation of low carbon skills and jobs through the development of projects that can create economic opportunities, increasing levels of investment and business growth in a low carbon agenda. Then item 3 is the agenda for LPG adoption, ERGP, and the national determined conditions. To understand the impact on jobs of a given spending activity, one must incorporate a time dimension into the measurement of employment creation. Within the context of the global climate crisis, we need to begin consistently incorporating environmental effects in the measurement of output and productivity. Like most of the speakers have indicated, there are key items to look at when we talk about job creation. It's easy to project a speculative figure of jobs that could be created when a particular amount of money is invested in any society. But if we don't take into consideration the time element, it will just be a projection in the future that might never be achieved. So we are working essentially with time. Whatever models we're looking at adopting, we're looking at models that can actually work within a given time frame. So among our key recommendations, which we'll highlight later, improving government regulations, which is in the office of the President and the Vice President. Infrastructure, policies, and increased awareness is required for LPG adoption, particularly. Key recommendations include implementation of strong government policies, schemes, and incentive-based models that will encourage easy adoption of these openings. In order for us to talk about employment in a low-carbon sector, we need to first define what kind of jobs are generated in that kind of initiative. A low-carbon sector can be defined as the activities which generates products and services which themselves deliver low-carbon outputs. The ILO and the UNEP define green jobs, which is the result of low-carbon initiative, as the direct employment in economic sectors and activities which reduce their negative environmental impacts, ultimately resulting in levels that are sustainable. Spending money in any area of any economy, whether regional, local, statewide, or federal, naturally leads to employment generation. We will create jobs. Since people are needed to produce any good or service that the economy supplies, this is true regardless of whether the spending is done by private business, households, or government entity. At the same time, for a given amount of spending within the economy, for every given 1 million that is invested, there are differences in the relative levels of job creation through spending that same 1 million if you are investing it in fossil fuels. So if you invest $1 million in fossil fuels and you probably let for the purpose of iteration, you get about 500,000 jobs. If you invest that same $1 million in low carbon initiatives, you get about 50% more jobs than when you invest it in fossil fuels. There are three sources of job creation associated with the expansion of spending. There's one direct, there's indirect, and there's induced effect, induced jobs, induced effects. These are the results that amount from low carbon initiative investment. Clean energy investments have the capacity to raise economy-wide labor productivity as defined appropriately through two channels. By expanding total employment per dollar of expenditure, it provides new opportunities for unemployed and underemployed workers to be more productive. And by generating energy from clean sources, it increases the level of goods. By goods, we mean the good parts that are delivered. We produce a it also correspondingly reduces the production of bads, as opposed to producing GHG, greenhouse gases, as opposed to clean energy. Overall then, properly considered on a macro scale, the productivity effects of a clean energy investment project, including both energy productivity as well as labor productivity, are likely to be strongly favorable. Any type of spending activity creates employment over a given amount of time. To understand the impact of jobs of a given spending activity, one must therefore incorporate a time dimension into the measurement of employment creation. For example, a project that creates 100 jobs that lasts for 1 year only, only needs to be distinguished from another project that creates 100 jobs that continues for 10 years. It is important to keep time dimension in mind, like I mentioned earlier, in any assessment of the impact on a job creation of any clean energy investment activity. These are some of the key pointers for the ERGP agenda. We're looking at having 50 million jobs during a planned horizon of at 3.7 million jobs per annum. It is achievable. The ERGP also aims to restore sustained economic growth while promoting social inclusion and laying the foundations for long-term structural change. It also aims to invest in Nigerians' human capital development by continuing to provide support for the economically disadvantaged, create jobs, improve accessibility, affordability, and quality of healthcare across the country, and guarantee improved human capital. This slide just talks essentially about LPG adoption and the basic challenges that has hampered the progress over time. I'll just highlight it briefly. For the LPG adoption to reach its prime objectives and reach its goals, These key things need to be considered, and the government has its part to play in this. Improvement of government regulation in terms of utilization, public policy, is an important factor that when the government plays their part, you see improvement in the way people respond to having LPG as an alternative means of not just for cooking, for power and all the rest. Improved infrastructure, which some of the keynote speakers indicated very clearly. Supply chain investment. If much more is not done in that part to improve infrastructure, one of the guests here was talking about bringing in tanks, and people don't have the cylinders, so there's no flow. In some countries, the people do not own the cylinders. They exchange it with a gas company, which is much more sustainable. That model is seen in Malaysia and in Indonesia. Indonesia, within a 6-year period, were able to save, by switching from kerosene to LPG, over $6 billion in 6 years. So I believe we can do it. And there was a tremendous amount of job created in that process. So initiating incentive policies, create schemes and tax breaks, which one of the speakers also mentioned about having tax holidays. So if people know that if we adopt this for the period that we are keying into it, we're going to be paying little to nothing on the extra things we're supposed to be paying for. So there are tax incentives, not just on LPG, on other renewable energy sources like solar panels, wind energy, whatever other low carbon initiative we decide to put into place. But our focus on this is for the LPG. So the other item there is consumer empowerment. Initiate schemes that can help them switch from kerosene to LPG, which I just mentioned briefly now. Then improved awareness, sensitization, and public awareness. This talks about teaching people, helping them to understand what it means to have LPG as an alternative. Because of lack of education, most people, especially in the rural areas, even some parts of the urban areas, consider LPG as an alternative as being very dangerous because of gas explosions and the rest. Some of us have gas cylinders that have never gone for any quality control check. We have had it for like 5-10 years, it's been there. Those are the potential hazards that lead to such explosions that we find that make people start to get scared about, okay, I don't think we should go into this. But when the government puts in measures, schemes and policies that can help check these imbalances, you have an opportunity to bring in your cylinders to have it checked or replaced at a low cost. It makes it easier. In Indonesia, for example, the government gave out stoves, regulators, and 3 kg cylinders to a great population. And like I said, the amount of adoption has been massive over less than half a decade. So this is the agenda for the national determined conditions. If you go through, you see most of the speakers here have can identify easily with these, like NASA can identify with reforestation as well as off-grid. Then the 20% conditional and 45% unconditional emissions and reductions can also relate to that. Then a speaker from the Ministry of Petroleum can also relate with ending gas flaring, which he also highlighted very clearly. So the only part I'm going to speak on here is the part that has to do with the car to bus, then the off-grid solar section. I stay in Abuja, and the amount of heat we get in Abuja is nothing compared to anywhere else down south. On the average, we can do as within a square area, you're looking at 7 kilowatts of electricity can be generated within 1 square area. With the kind of heat, you have temperatures that go as high as 104 degrees Fahrenheit. So the potential for generating a lot of power on small scalable levels in Nigeria, let me not isolate to the north alone, is very high. So if we, with proper government policies that we are looking at already, we'll see a gross escalation positively of mini solar grids, small hydropower, and a lot of other initiatives that would encourage off-grid solar. Then we talked about, I want to talk also about car to bus. The amount of emission cars generally give off worldwide is alarming. Nigeria also, because there's no check on emission control, we have one of the worst levels of pollution in the world in Nigeria. It's record high. So if we begin to look at other measures of reducing greenhouse gas, we're looking at maybe having hybrid systems whereby you have gas and electric buses. Then people begin to switch from their cars to electric buses or hybrid systems. But that won't be effective if the transportation system is not structured in such a way that people want to actually use the bus system. In the same way we talked about the train system. That also has its own advantages as with regards to gas, electric trains also. We have let me not say miles to go in getting to that point, but I think we can get there sooner than later. Well, I think we're familiar with let me just go through, my slides are almost done. So the objectives of the plan are threefold. Firstly, the ERGP aims to restore growth, macroeconomic stability, and engender economic diversification. In achieving this objective, the plan intends to drive fiscal stimulus through increased government spending, like you already see with this low carbon initiative, ensure monetary stability, improve the balance of trade, and focus on key sectors, driving the enabling growth such as agriculture, like you see with NESL, energy, micro and small medium enterprises, manufacturing and services. The plan also seeks to achieve the above by the inter alia leveraging on information technology. Data and IT is very fundamental, as we have heard also from our previous speakers. Secondly, the plan aims to invest in the Nigerian people by continuing to provide support for the economically disadvantaged, create jobs, improve accessibility, affordability, and quality of healthcare across the country, and guarantee and improve human capital development through access to basic quality education for all. Finally, the ARGP aims to significantly increase investment in infrastructure through robust public-private partnership arrangements, simplify and improve the legal regulatory framework for doing business in Nigeria, not business as usual, and promote digital-led growth through the expansion of broadband coverage. These are the key recommendations. First, government's continued and renewed support matched with cohesive collaboration with the relevant stakeholders will result in a high output for all proposed human capital expectations as regards job creation. Policies that would ensure security and policies that will ensure security of financial and human capital investments in a low carbon economy will also set a roadmap that would have long-term benefits for the nation. Setting the stage for retraining and preparing the current workforce for a low carbon economy will lead to an effective transition from fossil fuel jobs to low carbon in the near future. I'll enumerate on this briefly. When you invest in any economy, you're talking about low carbon investment. The jobs that are produced are green jobs. Green jobs are not the regular jobs that you already have. So it requires you actually teaching people how to get assimilated into that system. That includes people that are already working in the regular sector, having them retrained to fit in. That starts also from, you have stakeholders. Okay, I'll talk about that in the next slide. So working with relevant stakeholders like the NUC, TED Fund, and ITF to introduce into their current teaching curriculum a robust and constantly evolving training manual. Yes, no problem. Okay, to prepare for a future for formal and informal jobs that become available for low carbon economy. Then collaboration with public and private firms to come together to have private, pilot projects initiated, like having simple pilot schemes, like you can have electric buses in some parts of the nation. run as a pilot project. So to start gearing people's minds towards a low carbon economy. And then you have, the list is not exhaustive. Like, I just had to put these at fundamental pointers to lead us to the direction we are going to. But this will help us get to a healthier, more robust low carbon economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we would now invite our last presenter, Mr. Femi Adeyemo. He's co-founder Energy. And he will be talking about, again, the energy space. But with a little bit, we will be moving a little bit tangentially from gas to solar and solar hybrids. Welcome, Mr. Adeyemo.
Thank you, Dalapo. I think it's afternoon now. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Permit me to stand on existing protocol. So I will bring a bit of a twist, even though I will talk a bit on gas too. So, and I will try to stay, within 15 minutes. So low carbon investment opportunities, hybrid power solutions. So, why are we here? This is not really clear. But the reason why we are emitting so much carbon in this country is because, so as a country, our global energy we're generating per capita is 14 watts. And if you look at the global average, it's 339 watts. So we're doing 14. So that means we need like at least 20x before we could be talking of being average, not even an industrialized nation. Because if you want to be an industrialized nation, you need 1,000 megawatts for 1 million people. So a country, updates day before yesterday, 198 million people. So that means we need to generate 198,000 megawatts. And now we're at 4,000. So we can see the huge disparity. And of course, this is what that has led us to, right? From the I pass my neighbor generator to the 3 kVA and all that, and we can see carbon being emitted. And of course, we know what the effect is. And of course, if you look at our industries, right? Some of them have 5 generators. This is from a study we did about 2 years ago in partnership with the Solar Nigeria UK head, where we did a study of industrial players in Kano and Kaduna. And we realized that, a lot of them, they live basically on diesel. And that has then brought us down as a nation to even our people carrying their generators to the filling station, because the gas stations won't sell petrol to their jerrycan. Okay, so I mentioned this. So where is the opportunity for low carbon investment? As a company, over the last 4 years, 2014, January, that's when we started operation. We've tried to look at where is the opportunity and how can we power Nigeria with low carbon sources. So we've got our hands dirty. Urban residential, we've done a lot of that. Microgrid, we have 2 operational microgrids that's in the rural communities. These are solar home systems in rural communities, and this is one of the projects where we were involved in the business development, and this is in Kano, powering an industrial facility. This is actually the first phase. It's been planned to scale that up, and this is a PV diesel solution. It has no battery. So I will get more into that later. So what is the right energy mix that we should have in the country for us to be able to unlock the potentials that we have? solar PV plus battery. Yes, there are a lot of that deployment already in the country, and this could be the right mix for off-grid standalone solar home solutions. Then we're talking of the solar PV plus battery plus grid. So in urban centers, there was a report by, I think, World Bank and Dalbeck that states that any country that has less than 4 hours of supply from the grid is considered off-grid, right? And if you look at Nigeria, that means the entire country is off-grid. So these, yeah, I mean, maybe those 1 or 2 hours that we get on a daily basis in the urban area, yes, we could plug it into the grid, and then we could have that as a mix for the individual, I mean, urban residential rooftop solutions. Then we've seen a lot of deployment on PV diesel. Not a lot, I mean, it's still at the nascent stage, but I mean, we're seeing that happening already in the country. I mean, based on the analysis that has been done on the sustainability and the profitability, anything lower than 350 kVA of high consumption load, it's not profitable, right? And then this then takes me to this, solar PV CNG. So there has been some conversation with CNG. So now, because we don't have pipelines everywhere, that used to be a challenge until a few companies are coming up now with the virtual pipeline, which is the skids, which are the Ministry of Petroleum Resources speaker mentioned. So I'm aware that the Intercontinental Hotel, so if you go to Intercontinental Hotel today, you see skid packed, 2 trucks. So Intercontinental Hotel is using CNG, and I mean, they have the right mix, because analysis has been done that if you use CNG, you can save about 30% compared to diesel. Right, so I mean, we need to begin to unlock what we have as a nation. And for us, I mean, we've seen that one of the reasons, I will talk on that in my next slide. I want to keep to time. So we've seen that why we're where we are as a nation is most of the decision makers, they probably don't believe that this low carbon energy sources works. And I'll tell you an example. About 2 months ago, I was having a conversation with someone who chairs board of not less than 4 companies. I mean, these are listed companies. And he told me that the problem why renewable energy or solar energy has not scaled is because it can't power air conditioners. So for someone that influential, so then I then told my team that, hey, we have a big problem at hand in this nation, and we need to begin to let the decision makers realize that these actually work. And what have we then done as a company? So what we've done is to then, which of course we're still onboarding as many of those as possible. So today with KPMG, we have partnered with them, power their data recovery center with solar, power the homes of not less than 7 of their partners, and they're using solar to power air conditioners. I mean, that's one of them. Of course, Bank of Industry is another one which we've worked with very well. Even the, I mean, up to the previous acting MD, I mean, a lot of them for the last 2 years, they have been using solar in their homes, not just for lights or for television. It's power, pressure pump, water pump, air conditioners, right? We need to get to that level. I mean, I'm sure if I take a census of us in this room, so it is a price. Yes, so good question. So the price, and that is exactly what we've done. So we know that the price is a problem. So what we've done is to then, and I can tell you that as a company, we are currently deploying solutions where you don't have to buy it outrightly. We have looked at what you're spending on a monthly basis on the fossil fuel, I mean the diesel. Can we structure something for you so that you can pay over a period of time? Or, I mean, we even have some organizations that prefer to say, hey, power is not my business. Let me just pay you on a monthly basis and you give me uninterrupted power. And we've done a lot of that. We have hotels, pharmacy outlets in Lagos that are purely powered with solar. And they run air conditioner. For us, we want you to use the air conditioner. It's not, I mean, we're not saying solar is just for light. Because that has been the belief. I mean, initially people thought solar is not working because of the street light that they've seen that are not working. Right? And we call those, anyway, let me spare that. So what we've done is, over the last 4 years, we have about 1 megawatt of distributed generation capacity. We've installed up to 1 megawatt. And in battery, we've done up to 4 megawatt hour battery storage. And now what we're saying is, we're currently doing this, which is, I mean, about $5 million, raising that to deploy 1,000 units. And I can tell you that we're strictly focusing on the decision makers, the guys, the people that can unlock the next $50 million for us to be able to do not 10,000, but not 1,000, but 10,000. We've done a lot of poultry farms. And interestingly, most of the poultry farms that we've done, they are owned by people outside Nigeria. I mean, Nigerians that live in Canada, that live in America, but they have solar, I mean, they have farms, and they want to be able to monitor what is happening at the farm. They don't want a situation whereby, I mean, they're telling them petrol is this today, and I mean, it is 50 liters that is consumed today, next week it's another 100 liters. So with that, they've been able to run that. We had a program where we even wanted to scale that 1,000 units of poultry, but we couldn't get funds to do that, right? Because, I mean, the decision makers then, they didn't believe that it worked. So that's part of why we went back to say, these people that are the one that will sign the check, how can we make that happen? And I'm sure that, I mean, with National here, we can see how your risk sharing and your guarantee can probably help, because the investors are very interested in this. I can tell you that about 2, 3, sometimes last month, there was a session for about 4 days at a hotel where not less than 50 people across the world, including investors, private equity, branch capitals, and the likes were there. They want to invest, but they're not interested in $5 million, right? So we need to, but at least let us prove something so that when this is proven already, maybe in the agricultural value chain, I mean, the irrigation, poultry farms, processing, we have an industrial player that every month they consume 30 million naira worth of diesel. And they've come to us asking us, can we switch this to either maybe solar, gas, or something to reduce the consumption? So I'm saying let's move from, yeah, I mean, it's good to plan and all that, but now we need to act. This is a time for action. And I mean, I just put these 2 pictures. One of the issues that has been raised by the bankers and the investors before is, yeah, solar is not, I mean, how can you de-risk the investment if you're giving people to pay for 24 months or 36 months? Is there a technology that ensures that they will pay? So what we've done internally is to develop this product. So this is more or less a 3 kVA system, and this is the 5 kVA. This, you can stack it up to 50 kVA. We have a system we just commissioned on Monday, which is an 100 kilowatts. Again, it seems, I mean, Nigerians outside are seeing the value. It's a student hostel plus apartment in Owerri with gym, with gym, salon, and business center. 100 kilowatt, fully powered by solar. Right. So the opportunity is there. Not necessarily only on the, I mean, corporate employee, it is there in the agricultural sector, it is there, I mean, across the different value chain. And like I've mentioned, the proper mix. Solar plus gas, when we're talking of more than 1 megawatt, I mean, it's viable. I think I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've heard a lot today. So we will now start with the panel session where we then really drill down more and workshop this. One of the interesting things for me about joining the NESG was, the ability to be part of something that actually makes things work. So a lot of us here, I'm sure, are tired of talking. So we want to be able to be part of something that would cause impact. So can I invite the panelists, please, to presenters or panel? Yes, the presenters who are now panelists. But I think we first need to rearrange the room a little bit.
Yes.
Yes, Wole.
We want to move the chairs to one side of the room, so we are getting some help with that. And so, in a moment, we'll just call everyone in. All right, let's just deploy everything to the middle. Okay, so we'd like to call the panelists forward. Oh, where's the... Oh, okay. All right, no problem. I guess he will join us. All right, so let's call on the others, starting with the representative of PINT, James. Please, can you join us? Thank you. Representing the PMO LPG Adoption Program, we have two people that will be joining us on the panel: Chief Chris Eziolo and Wole Sulaiman. All right. And then we have, yes, Femi. Femi, please join us too. Okay. So Mr. Abdulhamid will join us shortly. I think he just went for a bathroom break. So, you here? You here? Okay. Sorry. Do you mind moving there? Thank you. So two of us can sit here. So Mr. Abdulhamid will join us. So one of the things we are hoping to achieve with this is to try and connect the dots. So much has been discussed. Just listening to many of the presentations, I can begin to imagine. I'm supposed to be here as well. I forgot. My apologies. You're supposed to be here as well. Yes, we need one more chair. We'll just grab one. Yeah, but we still have Mr. Abdulhamid coming in. All right, so while she helps us get another chair, I'll just give some background. Okay, so like I said, we're hoping that we can connect the dots. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted because we're trying to get one more chair in the room. Dolakwa, do we have an arrangement for a chair? Okay, maybe you can just bring one here. Okay, do you mind sitting here? Okay, thanks. Okay, so we apologize. No balance, not very balanced. But hopefully it's still a useful conversation. So as I was saying, we're hoping that we can always connect the dots. So much has been discussed in the presentations, from the agricultural presentation to the gas, and of course to more recently on solar. So I'll just allow Dolapo to lead. We have Mr. Abdulaziz joining us now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone again. Please, can we move forward so that it doesn't seem like we're talking to empty seats, please? Can we just, please, if you can, if you are behind, please. Thank you. So we have a cozier room. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Abdul Hamid, I'm actually going to start with you on the questions. I think my first question would be, you laid out very well the critical pathways to achieving the DC goal. And my question is, enabler of development and an enabler of development in the agri value chain, what in your view, because we talked a lot about what it should be like, we've talked a lot about, you know, the different things that need to be in place, the challenges we have, you know, the hurdles and everything. The key thing is then capital. And that's what we've not really, we've tangentially touched on that they all go into capital, but I want us to drill down on how we can then attract investment. So my first question, sir, is as an enabler of development, because you enable and incentivize investment, what are the imperatives, you know, for attracting low carbon investment? Now, you incentivize it, to my understanding, on a larger scale, which is why you would be dealing on an aggregator level. We still need investment on the smaller scale, where you can have people then come together, aggregate, and you will stand behind them, because obviously you are not going to stand behind or guarantee, you know, a project that would fail. It will have to be one that's viable. What are the imperatives for us to get to that stage where we begin to attract more investment on the lower levels before you come in?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Let's define what you mean by lower levels. Obviously, according to statistics, they say sometimes 60%, sometimes 70% of Nigeria's population is involved in one form of agricultural activity or the other. So you can't get any more scale than that. So first of all, if you want a rapid step change, there is no subsector of the economy that can give you an overnight change in the lives and livelihoods of the masses of the people than agriculture. That's number one. But when you say agriculture, most people think of primary production agriculture. It's not about production agriculture. It's about the value chain. For example, people keep saying youth should be mainstreamed into agriculture. It's a wrong connotation. The notion is that they will go with a hoe and a cutlass and break their back and till the soil. No. Nowadays, you deploy machine systems that are programmable, that can do land leveling through laser guidance and a lot of things. A young person can sit in an air-conditioned 150 horsepower tractor or even less, listen to his iPod, talk to his girlfriend, and do more than 500 hectares over a short period of time without knowing. He could even wear his shirt and tie. Come off it, sir. You know what happens in the grain belt of the US? People leave schools when they go on holiday, they go to the farms. They ride on huge machines. They do their internet browsing and everything on those machines. That is one area. Sorry, I digress a bit. So it depends on what kind of primary production do you define. Is it our grandfather's kind of primary production, or the NASA's farm smart model, where you leverage machine and technology to do the heavy lifting for you and still make money to boot? That is one. Two, you need to follow up with post-primary production, primary processing. How to capture the value that God has given you, that nature has given you, and preserve it through chilling, through cooling, through drying and preservation. Number three, you have got, number four or three, you have got to then store that value and lock it away. When you lock that away, you need to transmit that value to the next level, industrial processing, where value addition happens. Something that is worth 10 naira, by the time that you do industrial value add processing, it becomes 100 naira like magic. Then you have got to brand, you have got to package it and brand it to appeal to the humans. Then you have got to transmit that value to either consumer market, industrial market, or export market. Except you approach this question that you ask in an integrated value chain approach, you are bound not to attract any kind of investment anywhere along the value chain. So I want to draw our attention to that complex situation. So it takes a village, literally, to deal with each segment of a value chain, but that is why the central bank created NASL. Yep. To spend government money, to spend our money, to bring together, and let me tell you, I really want to thank the NESG. I was just telling Mr. Jayola, I said, look, we need this kind of focused business-like meetings, right? So that somebody's challenge, I provide a solution there and then. His own challenge, I provide a solution. Right here, I have already networked with a lot of people, and he was mentioning what we can do. So this is the broad picture of what I can say to that.
Right, and obviously that's the value of these events, the networking opportunity. But staying with you, I really believe that NERSL can play quite a leadership role in what we're trying to do here in terms of creating an ecosystem for low carbon investments because of the type of capital that you can attract. So a lot of co-investing can happen because of the de-risking that you do.
Yes.
And part of the de-risking can be in partnering with companies like Energy or providers of that service to ensure that there is a community that is solar powered or efficiently powered such that a whole community is created. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to hear more about that as a plan going forward.
So that's very specific. So what I said earlier, remember what I mentioned, we need an embedded off-grid powered clustered processing system that takes the urban area to the rural area, right? So the first thing you need to do is to have a paradigm shift where industry stays in Lagos, primary production happens somewhere in Kebbi. That destroys the economies right from the beginning. You need to have embedded systems. But that calls to question, how do you power that embedded system? How do you give it energy? And that loops back to how can we have CNG in a very portable form on a skid system that can go and power that system for me. So you need to structure the system itself. Number two, you need to create a business model. And number three, it is that business model that can detect the kind of structured financing that is required. People think that nowadays you need to pay cash upfront for big mega projects. You don't have to. It's a matter of structuring. And lastly, I want to say it's amazing that we have signed up to the COP. Is it COP
21?
Yeah. Yeah, COP 21 and whatever. And there are huge funds that are supporting climate initiatives around the world. It was only when the Ministry of Environment developed the initiative of meeting with NASA saying, how can we get that fund into agriculture? We sat down precisely the question, how do we do it? We said, look, first of all, disaggregate the agricultural sector, create structured business models, and create a financing framework that makes sense to finance. And it doesn't matter whether it's climate fund or equity or bank finance. You have to give clarity. Now, once you do this granularity and you create bite-sized projects, it's easy for finance to come in. You don't have to ask finance to do primary production, processing, logistics, packaging. No. Deal with each one according to its appetite. But when you sit back, you see that all the systems are linked in a value chain format. So finally, I just want to say it's not easy for one entity, and I like what you say when you say community. What we call a stakeholder roundtable. For every solution that we need to create is beyond one entity, but NASL has the capability to convene such kind of stakeholder roundtable when it's agricultural, when it's agribusiness, when it has to do with food security. And I'm happy NESG can be the lead platform for that.
Right. So, but I'm still on this point because
go ahead.
I think it's such a great opportunity for the power providers to work with NERSL, because NERSL is not really about, in my mind, providing finance. It's de-risking. It's de-risking. And part of that de-risking is making sure that power is available to galvanize that agri-industry in that community. So I wanted to hear about those type of initiatives that you're looking at?
So right here, there are three elements for that. First of all, you have got to convince the investor to say, okay, there is enough sufficient raw material. There are 200 million people to feed in Nigeria, an additional 100 million around Nigeria, right? 250, 200 million people. An investor has to understand that the rice I need, the maize I need to do cornflakes or Weetabix, the raw material is available and it's cheap. Two, he needs to then set up the capital investment required to set up the processing system. Three, inevitably it comes to energy. If we can do that, then we make a case for entities like him to say, okay, NASA, you have created that system, the farmers are there to produce the raw material, which is taken by the processor, which then does the value addition, but at the end of the day, what kind of energy solution do you need to be competitive? I am not an energy expert, and I don't know how to configure the energy solution. I will need somebody like him to do the optimization for me, to create a package of cornflakes that on import parity basis is cheaper than what we import from Kellogg's in the US, right? We have $22 billion of import substitution opportunity in Nigeria, and more of them are agricultural. I think Africa, according to FDB, is $35 billion import substitution market. Nigeria alone takes up $22 billion of that $35 billion. It means if we can do agribusiness right, every single packet or can of food, feed or fiber on our shelf, we can actually recreate it in Nigeria. But it always boils back, what kind of energy supply are we talking about? How reliable is it? How cost effective it is? Okay? So, like I said, NASAL can lead, NASAL can provide the platform, but we will need also a bigger platform like NESG. My limit is to the finance industry and to the investment world. But I need more than finance. As a de-risking company, we're a smart company. If I de-risk and I put my guarantee behind a project, I'll not be stupid. I have got to make sure that the project does not fail in the first place. How do we make sure that this project does not fail? I need a whole village around that project. What I mean by village, I'm not talking of villages. I need him, I need virtually everyone, including him, to be around me to ensure if I put my 75% guarantee on the face value of that finance, my guarantee comes back to me safe, otherwise my balance sheet is gone.
Seeing that we are workshopping, and it's very important that we get results here, because we need to then go back and then go and look at this again. A few things that we mentioned here. There is need for an ecosystem. I think that's the reference to the village that we hear. There's need for an ecosystem, and there are stakeholders in that ecosystem that need to basically do different parts. Now, on the lower levels, it appears that we then need people who will incubate these businesses. He talked about the value chain, production, storage, logistics. You know, those things don't just grow out of the ground. You know, something must enable them happen, such that he can bring in his own big box to guarantee. So I think those are some more things that we just need to note. I hope our rapporteurs are noting. I just thought to mention so that we can note it. Okay, just talking about energy, I'm very sorry, Mr. Derefaka, that we didn't get you to I don't know how we missed that out, because you are critical to this conversation, and you notice that a lot of questions were going to you. And the reason why a lot of questions were going to you is because in terms of energy, scale is needed, which means what the opportunity of gas commercialization presents is one in which, if we do it properly, it can actually help the agricultural value chain that we're discussing, and a lot more of the sectors that we're discussing. So my question is, now businesses are done in the States. The CEO said that very clearly. Everybody does business in a state, you know, even though what you are doing is at the federal level. How can states and private sector get involved in this plan for commercialization to create clusters? For this low carbon growth initiative to work, it has to work in clusters, and those clusters are in states. We can't, if we do this at a high level in which someone is off-taking, just like how we have right now in our gas, is not going to work. So what's in the plan to get states involved, or to be able to get, you know, these smaller businesses, micro businesses involved through the states? How can we create these smaller clusters using this plan? Is there in your plan something that, you know, says a certain percentage, for example, of the gas should go in this way? you know, if you are going to be bidding for this, so a certain percentage of the gas should be doing this. So do we have that in the plan?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. In my presentation, I did mention that the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program is strictly market-driven. Market-driven in the sense that the market decide what they want to do with it. Now, what we are bringing into to the table is the technology that can move the product, the flare gas to market product, to where the market is. And that is why I did mention that while the sole race gas companies are selling the gas at $5 to $7 or $2, our floor price for the gas flare is 25 cents. Now, that 25 cents is to encourage investors to be able to see how they can design their program to have return on investment. Apart from that, there's a long-term tax holiday. 5 years is standard, and now they're going to have 7 years for disadvantaged areas. And of course, in the Niger Delta, it's a disadvantaged area. Now, to key into Aliyu's concern up north, I'm sure there are a lot of disadvantaged areas up north. So if an investor, as part of his proposal, when we send him the request for proposal and he submits his business plan during our evaluation, he is able to capture agriculture up north. And then maybe he's saying, I'll buy this gas instead of 25 cents, 10 cents. And this is the market I'm looking to. The proposal evaluation committee look at it, what is going to be the return, and of course the socioeconomic impact in that area. Those are the things we've designed as part of our technical criteria to say, okay, this investor is not just only helping us reduce gas flare, it's equally helping us trigger a business up north. So he's our preferred bidder, XYZ, because he's able to tick all the boxes, plus in addition to say, it will equally help and support the EROGB growth plan. Thank you.
So while you were presenting, I got the sense that this commercial gas project, which is supposed to reduce flaring, is somewhat different from the typical gas industry that we hear of in Nigeria, because what I hear very often is that pricing remains a major challenge there, that there's some regulation of pricing. And I was wondering, can you just clarify whether or not the pricing of the sale of the gas under the system regulated or is totally deregulated?
Okay, let me just try to make some bit of a clarification. That is what we call non-associated gas. That does not come with crude oil. That's what we call associated gas. Associated gas, AG. The one we're looking to address under the Nigerian gas flare commercialization program is the associated gas. It comes with the crude oil. The producers take the crude, and then the one that they want to use, the gas they want to use at their location to power their plant, do gas reinjection or gas lifting, and then some commitment they've made to their own off-takers. The remaining one that hits the flare header, that the flare,